Alrighty, welcome to the show. How are you
Thank you
doing?
for having me. I'm
Mhm.
doing all right, I think. I don't know. It's such a loaded question. I'm healthy and safe. So,
That's good. I mean, if there's ever anybody that's going to give me like a full answer, it's going to be you. Uh,
yeah.
would
Yeah,
you,
I
would
hope
you,
so. That was still a little vague.
that was, yeah, it was very simplified. That was very good. Introduce yourself. Let us know who you are and what do you do?
What do I do? Okay, my name is Mendoza. I'm a master's level social worker, but
Mhm.
I do not do clinical social work. I do public health social work.
Okay.
And I currently run a nonprofit here in New Mexico called Faces for the Future,
Mhm.
which is a health career pipeline program for high school juniors and seniors.
Okay. All right. So you're just hoping to get them into professional development or into college? Is that the case?
Yeah, more or less. So we take students who are interested in entering into the healthcare field, and that can
Hmm.
be anything healthcare related, right?
Hmm.
So clinical healthcare, behavioral healthcare,
Hmm.
community education,
Hmm.
but might not have access to those things, or don't have access due to a like variety of reasons, and we place them into healthcare mentorships.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, throughout their junior and senior year, and then connect them to career.
Okay. Not a problem. And then, yeah, so just so you're listening, sometimes it gets a little glitchy, so it's okay. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, okay. I might move to a different part of my house. Just like flag me down.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's not a big deal. Okay, so that's a lot. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. How does one fall into that kind of work?
Yeah, because I tell a lot of people that I'm a social worker, and they assume, I mean, the obvious things that social workers do, right? Connecting to services, counseling, more therapeutic work, which is not what I do. So I
Hmm.
used to be in more clinical work, not as a social worker,
Okay.
but prior to this. And I got really frustrated because I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I was sending people back out into the same broken system, right?
Okay.
Um, and so I had a very long route in graduate school. I went for counseling first, and then I went back for social work, but chose a different
Hmm.
um, kind of specialty.
Okay.
And I kind of just fell into this job, honestly. I think a lot of life
Hmm.
can be luck sometimes.
Okay. I mean, what was the broken system that you feel like you're pushing back people back into? I mean, what about it's broken?
Well, I think that's a, I don't
Hmm.
know if you really want me to go off on that right now when we're in a
Yeah,
pandemic. Yeah.
absolutely do. Come on.
Oh no. Okay. So I did a lot of stuff. So I did counseling for a little bit.
Hmm.
I also did legal advocacy work.
Okay.
And I worked in all the psychiatric hospitals throughout the state. I
Hmm.
worked in nursing homes. I worked in like boarding homes,
Hmm.
and I worked with kind of state health officials.
Okay.
And so the gaps in services that I saw, and what I mean by sending people back out is we tend to, I'm going to be really careful about this because I
Hmm.
see the value of clinical work and it's absolutely necessary. But we're bringing people in to our offices and to our spaces, right? We're not coming to them, they have to come to us.
Yeah.
And we're working with people that have generational trauma, historical trauma.
Hmm.
They've experienced depression and social determinants. And we are trying to help them navigate systems that, in a lot of ways, are set up to fail people, right? And a
Hmm.
really good
Hmm.
example of this is like food security programs like SNAP or food stamps. To even qualify for that is really hard. It's a ton of paperwork. Same thing for Medicaid, same thing for disability. But even, working with victims of domestic violence, again, they're coming, like in the past, they would come to me and then I would try and help them navigate can I cuss on this?
Yeah. Yeah.
A
Absolutely.
pretty fucked up situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I became really defeated and really frustrated. Um, and a lot of the work that I did was interacting with our broken healthcare system. And
Mm,
I watched people literally die. Um, and so this position, which aims to get more people into the healthcare workforce and incentivize our talent to stay in New Mexico, really spoke to me.
okay.
And it starts at a young age, right? And that's
Hmm.
important. If we're like working with people by the time they're, entering college, it's too late.
Well, do you feel like that's true? I mean, I certainly feel that at a certain point people are the way they are, but I mean, my grandmother and my mom would say all growing up, if somebody hasn't changed by the time they're 30, they're just not going to. Unless in my opinion, they go
Oh no,
through
well, then I'm
a sort
screwed,
of,
right?
unless they go through a sort of rock bottom situation, right? Like they're helpless and they're yeah, they have no hope, so they kind of have to. But
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you as far as earlier the better, but can anybody kind of reconditioned or helped in any way, do you feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So if that's true, that people by the time they reach 30 are the way that they are, I'm definitely like a lost cause.
I mean, I don't
I
know about
don't think
that. I don't know about that.
I mean, no, I know that that's not true, but I believe I believe two things. So if, I'm
Hmm.
going to take off like the like professional and just be kind of personal here. I want to acknowledge that there's things that can happen in people's lives and experiences that we can have that stack on top of each other
Sure.
that pull us into places that feel too hard to climb out of, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I think that burden happens over generations, especially in a place like New Mexico.
Hmm.
However, I also, more than anything, and this is probably the real reason why I got into this, I believe in the power of the human spirit.
Okay.
And I also believe that we develop over our lives. And I
Hmm.
see that in my family. Like I'm interacting with my 89-year-old grandfather right now who's
Yeah.
still changing. Um, and it's kind of shocking to us when we see somebody who's later in their life start to change, right?
Okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no,
I mean, I feel like it's strange because I feel like the whole idea of teaching an old dog new tricks, and it's
mm,
there's little things that you can change, little habits, this and that, but I feel like, I mean, I don't know, again, maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm jaded. But I don't think you can change anybody. They have to want it,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So the whole, like, people have to come to a realization themselves, and sometimes
Hmm.
that's rock bottom, and sometimes that's a big tragedy. Often it comes from a place of tragedy.
Hmm.
Um, no, you cannot change anyone, right? And that's
Hmm.
the reason we're all in, or we've all experienced failed relationships because we all try and change people.
Is that what's happening? Is that why
That's
I'm
maybe what's
single?
happening.
Tell me why.
I don't know.
Tell me
I'm
why I'm
trying to change
single, Mia.
people. Oh no.
This
Oh
is
no.
gonna turn
You're gonna
into
have to get
a
like a
love.
real counselor.
Uh, no, I mean, there's a variety of reasons, right? And there's a variety of reasons why people do things, and it's very easy to be biased or to try to kind of project your own situation or your imaging or your thoughts and beliefs onto other people and why they do the things they do. But
Mm,
it's important to try to remain neutral and objective, right? So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
but it's difficult. So I don't know. But with that said, I mean, what have you always been kind of this sort of person? I feel like in as I've gotten to know you, this is just somebody who you are. This is not somebody who you became. You were maybe born this way. Do you feel that about yourself, or do you feel like your life brought you to this?
Oh God. Uh, brought me into this work. Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, to being like this person who wants to help people. Yeah, and to
Mm,
this work. Yeah.
um, so I don't know. I think let me address that, and I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute. I think a lot of social workers and counselors get into this profession because they want to help people, and I
Uh-huh.
put up air quotes right around that because
Sure.
what that really means is that they want people to change. And we're not going to do that. Like, there is nothing that I can do that is going to change another person. And in all honesty, like, there's not a lot that we can do oftentimes to help other people in that big kind of way. I think it's a fallacy to think that. So yeah, did I used to want to help people? Absolutely. But and I'm not saying I don't. I'm saying that now I want the world to be a better place with me leaving it. And
Okay.
so have I always had that? I don't know. I don't think so. I think I've always been really, I think I've always been really aware that there's a lot of suffering in the world,
Hmm.
and I felt that that was really unfair
Yeah.
from a young age. And I didn't always want to be a social worker. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Oh.
And that obviously did not happen, and I would be terrible at it. Yeah. Um, so I don't know. I think that what I've always had is this just profound awe of what humans are capable of. Yeah. And I've always held on to that.
Okay. So you just kind of believe in people and you kind of want them to be okay. So, I mean, to an extent, yes, you have always been this way.
Yeah, I think so. I've always been drawn to it, at least. I don't know that I've always been optimistic, and I haven't always been giving. I've gone through periods in my life where I've been deeply selfish.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think we
but
all do, right? But I think
yeah,
to an extent,
maybe.
we're very young, and um, at least with my kids, when I look at them, there's something that they're born with. I didn't put it in there. I didn't do anything about it. It's just who they were from the second they were born, right? And
Mhm,
I can
mhm.
teach them different things, and they pick it up. It's a snowball effect. But um, yeah, I mean, from the second they were born, there was just a certain way, and it's it's interesting because I wonder, I'm like, where does that come from, right? Where does that part of us come from? Where is this need or desire to do certain things or to be a certain way develop? Is it genetic? Or is it a spiritual thing? I mean, I don't know. What do you think? You study people, right?
I study people. I also have a degree in religious studies.
Well, there you go.
So
Good
yeah, it's
question.
really, really studying people. Um, I, I think that you can't have one without the other, right? I wouldn't argue
Mm-hmm.
that people are not born with a set, like, certain characteristics, and we're even understanding now that trauma is genetic,
Mm-hmm.
right? So of course there's that, but I still really believe that for the most part, um, we I'm deeply existential, right? And that's something that I use when I do counsel people, and I think we can choose our own paths in a lot of way. And I say that understanding that I also, we live in America, we live in a place that's riddled with poverty and
Mm-hmm.
pain. I'm not saying I don't believe, like, I'm not saying we can choose our own path, like, you can be whatever you want. I think that's nonsense now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, we're not set from the start. I work with teenagers, and I am amazed at how optimistic they are. And then I think about my own life story, and I think, like, oh my God, what happens between the ages of like 18 and 23 where life just comes in and totally like rips that away? What
Mm-hmm.
happens to us, um, because they're
Mm-hmm.
frozen right now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you were pretty frozen for a second there. Can you hear me?
Okay, what about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hi.
Hey, hey.
Hey.
Better. Okay, we're
Okay.
back on.
All right, hang on, pause it. I'm gonna move
You're
because
gonna
this
pause?
is
All right, all
gonna drive
right.
me.
Hold on, folks.
Okay,
And we're back.
sorry.
No, it happens. That's that. I mean, that's the thing. We're living in a weird time right now where you have to do the show must go on, and
I know.
sometimes technology fails you, as it happens a lot of the time. I've done whole intros where didn't hit record or stuff like that, and
Yeah.
it's part of the deal. But you were saying, sorry. Do you remember where you were at?
No.
I mean, it's something that happens when you're a teenager, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. So I work with teenagers now, and I mentioned that I'm filled with like awe and wonderment at their optimism, especially because of the group of teenagers that I work with, right?
Yeah.
And then I think about my life story, and I just think, what happens between the ages of like 18 and 23 where that's just ripped away from us, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I hear you when you said maybe I'm jaded. Like I'm jaded too. And
Mm-hmm.
I look at these young people with their big wide eyes and their
Yeah.
feeling of taking on the world, and I just want to like protect that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Um, and like, how do we do that? And how do
Yeah.
you do that being a parent, right? Especially
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's a very difficult thing. I don't know. I mean, I try to keep the light on, right, for them in the sense that like I try to keep that spark alive and not taint them with my, I remember calling my dad very pessimistic when I was maybe 11 or
Mm-hmm.
12, and he hated that I called him that. He couldn't stand it. He got very upset, and I think because he just kind of he realized something about himself or
Yeah.
about how he was kind of viewed in the world. I've never asked him about it, but it sticks out because it not only did he get upset in the moment, but he brought it up later on a couple of times within maybe I want to say a couple of months,
Mm-hmm.
and it's difficult. I mean, life keeps happening, and it's as a single father, it doesn't get any easier. My parents were still together at that point, so it's very very easy to just kind of let life get to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's
Well, being
it's
pessimistic implies that like something has been lost from us, right? It's not something that you just are always. Like it implies that you used to be a different person and now you know too much.
yeah. I mean, to say no too much is yeah. I think that's one way to put it. It's a sad way to put it, in my opinion, because it implies that you can't unknow it now.
No, of course you can't. But I
Right.
mean,
So I mean, once you can't, if you can't unknow it, it's very difficult to go back to regain, I mean, that innocence, right? That spark, that joy. Not to say that I'm not happy anymore, but I'm very hesitant, right? It's that whole idea is like the wise man isn't just, he isn't wise, he's just more reserved. He doesn't react.
mm-hmm,
Right? And like the wise man says nothing.
mm-hmm.
It's because out of fear, I feel, of getting hurt, and it's a defense mechanism. But maybe that's just me.
I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we hold on, like we look at our children, or I don't have children, we look at children
Mm-hmm.
and their innocence, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think we glorify it now as adults, right?
Like
But I don't think,
romanticize it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't think we would want to be innocent. I think, and I'm going to say this like really carefully because I understand that again, there's a lot of violence in the world, but I think innocence is meant to be lost, right? And I don't think knowing too much is always, it always comes with suffering, but it's not the end all be all for us. It doesn't mean that we're lost. I think that if we look at the people that we lift up in history, like all these like religious leaders and spiritual leaders and movement leaders, right? They all know too much.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they take that and try to make something out of it. And I think that's the only thing that maybe we can do when we are people who know too much is we again try to leave the world a little bit better than how we came into it.
Right, right. I mean, it's such a, they are very beautiful people, and a lot of them tend to sacrifice themselves in a lot of different ways, right? Whether I feel like it's through movements and not having a personal life and just really putting themselves out there and just depleting themselves completely,
Mm-hmm.
or I mean, some of them really just emotionally, it takes an emotional toll and they do commit suicide, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's a very big thing. So how does one kind of battle that, right? How does one, besides, you know, the anti-anxiety and antidepressant meds and all that stuff, which I'm all about, right? If you need it, I myself, you know, I take Zoloft. So for, just because my anxiety just can be crippling sometimes. And but it's you know, you look at as you look at a person who maybe doesn't know too much, and you'll consider them naive, right? But then you look at the person who knows, quote unquote, too much, and they're jaded. Is how where do you how do you find that balance? I mean, is there such thing, or is these two categories?
Oh, okay, so I think that one thing that I want to address an earlier question that you asked in that
Yeah, yeah.
I really take a pretty hard stance in the field that I work in, right? Of technically, I still work in mental behavioral health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like we glorify self-sacrifice in this work. I feel like we glorify self-sacrifice in our education system, in our healthcare system,
Mm-hmm.
and we encourage people to become martyrs. And I really take issue with that, because the
Yeah.
messaging that we're sending people
Mm-hmm.
is that if you are not struggling in your profession, or if you are not hurting, then you are not doing it well.
You're not trying hard. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not trying hard enough. And that's, I could go off on, like, I really take issue with the whole, like, we should self-care more. I think that's bullshit. I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to take care of each other. Taking a bubble bath isn't going to fix, trauma. So I think,
I mean, that's true. I mean, it's not. It feels good. I mean, it's considered quote unquote self care, but that's not really actually self caring for yourself. Is
no,
putting
no,
a
and it's
band-aid
so
on something.
minimal. It is
Yeah.
putting a band-aid on it. So can you have both? Was your question? So I wanted to
Sure.
illuminate, like, you mentioned a lot of these people that we hold up and we glorify end up dying by suicide, right? Um, and yeah, that is true,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't take care of each other. Um, and however, can you have both? I don't think any of our, these people that I could list, or even mentors in my own life, exist without suffering. And I don't even think that they get necessarily to the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and I'm not coming from a place of, going to say this from a place that I'm, healed and whole. I experience grief all the time. I'm experiencing grief right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I don't know that I have the answers, Oscar. I think that
No, I mean, I don't think I'm
I,
trying to get the answer from you. I'm just
no,
relating
I
to my
think,
experience. You know.
yeah, I think that for me, all I can say is that somebody that I really admire a lot told me once that, like, it's always going to be hard,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And especially as a social worker, it's always going to be hard, and the odds are always going to be stacked against us, and we have to choose to do it anyway.
Mm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think in my life, um, I'm jaded, certainly, but I'm also, working on reclaiming optimism. And optimism, I heard this in a TED talk, so I'm not just going to quote it and not give credit somewhat, but optimism isn't the idea that things will be better, simply that they can be. Um, and
Okay.
I think that has to be true. It just has to.
They will be better. I mean,
No, 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 that they can be,
they
not that they
can be,
will,
they
right?
can
Not,
be better. Yeah,
yeah.
no, absolutely, absolutely, I agree. You know, and I smirk, and you guys can't hear my smirk, obviously, but it's so difficult sometimes. It's just I can't help it, and maybe I'm yeah, and I definitely am in that place right now these days. But at the same time, I'm very aware of the fact that my life is great. I have the things, I have the people, right? I wish I had a partner, but like that's not the case. And it's, but for all intents and purposes, like I have a really great life. So why do I feel this way, right? I think
Oh,
it's I'm lacking this intimate partnership and connection, but I don't know if that's going to solve it either.
well, I mean, so I also really like,
Mm-hmm.
don't want people, we always compare our like suffering, right? And we're all
Oh
doing it
yeah.
right now, right? We're
Right.
all like, when
Right.
you ask me how I am, and I said, well,
Uh-huh.
I'm not sick and I have like, a beautiful home and things that I need, doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that I'm great. And it doesn't mean, maybe, yes, I have a good life on paper and you have a good life on paper, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that your suffering isn't, um, immense. I mean, we
Yeah.
all feel things the same exact way, right? Somebody
Mm-hmm.
who is experiencing intense trauma, like the same things are happening in their brain as when we experience like a panic attack,
Mm-hmm.
more or less. And so I think we put ourselves into a pretty big hole when we think like, well, I have what I need. Why am I feeling this way? Because something is missing, because it
Mm-hmm.
hurts, because
Mm-hmm.
the place that we exist in right now is really fucking hard. This is hard on everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll stop saying
No, I mean, stop saying what?
that. The fuck word.
I mean, it's not a big deal. You gotta be yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. It's also complicated. I think you're a person I've always been able to kind of come to and really speak freely to, right? And that's not something you can find very easily. So maybe it's because you do what you do, or you're just a good listener.
I don't know. I
And
mean,
you asked the right questions too.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, I, I don't know if it's because I do what I do, or thank you for the comment on, being a good listener. Um, I think that I sit around and think about these things a lot, and I've thought about them a lot for my life.
Hmm.
Um, and what it means to suffer and to feel isolated and to really struggle. And I've also, fallen into the trap of comparing my suffering to other people's, but that prevents us from helping, right? Because the truth is, Oscar, if I sat over here and I was like, if I invalidated my suffering and my experience, it wouldn't help anybody, because in the moment of need, I wouldn't be able to connect,
Hmm.
right? I think we have to come to a place of understanding when we're hurting and accept ourselves in that. And that sounds so preachy, but I feel like we have to meet ourselves where we're at. And,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
No, no, no. I mean, it's absolutely true. We have to. Um, I don't want to.
I know. I know. I don't want to either sometimes. I
Right.
don't
Like
want to either.
you don't want to, and it's okay. It's okay to not want to. I know I need to, and I need to accept that this is where I am, and that's fine. It doesn't mean it's forever, and it doesn't mean it won't happen again.
It doesn't
Um,
mean it's fine though,
Right.
either.
Yeah,
Like,
no, yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean it's fine. It's like the whole idea of just like, oh, give it time and this and that. I was like, no shit, but like it hurts right now or it sucks right now. It doesn't, I mean, don't minimize it. And also, yeah, I shouldn't minimize it either.
mm-hmm,
By comparing myself or contextualizing it in a way that, minimizes my feelings. It is what it is. Yeah, but it's the after a point, like there's only one way to move on, and that's by moving on. And I feel like there's a lot of the time you got to take some action, right? Regardless
maybe.
of how you're feeling, because it's your body, your emotions will catch up. But again, at the same time, you don't want to avoid it,
Mhm,
and because it'll surface in some other way. So it's like you have to do the work. You can't avoid the process. It's going to catch up to you no matter what, right? And that's why people have substance abuse problems and other addictions or codependency issues, be it with
mhm,
emotional, romantic, love, drugs, sex. I mean, eating. We all do it. We all cope in some way. Um, it's just about finding that good way,
mhm.
which is very very personal. It's different for everyone. There's no one band-aid for everyone or for everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I absolutely get it. And you're making sense and you're resonating. That's why, I mean, it's I feel like if it's making me uncomfortable, that's probably because it's true.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did not
No,
expect this. Can I comment? I feel like this whole episode is me
no,
just like arguing with you, and I'm so sorry. But I want to comment on
no.
something you said,
Yeah.
because um, I feel, again, it's another like trap that we have of,
Uh-huh.
we need to move on. I want to say like so clearly to you and all the people that may or may not listen to this, that we have to like get that out of our vocabulary completely. There is no moving on. We, like, again, so corny, right? But we can only move with, because it's not like
Mhm.
we leave something behind. It's not like
Right.
I have left behind all of my trauma, like all of my
Mm,
experiences, and now I'm here, right? No, 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 no.
right.
It's
No,
still
yeah.
here. It's still here. Like that pain is still here. And in a time of a pandemic, like it's
Yeah.
even more here. It is
Uh-huh.
with me.
Because you're alone with it, right?
Because I am sitting here alone with it. Exactly. I'm dreaming about it. I wake up with it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, we are all super struggling right now. And
Yeah.
when you are truly like alone and without,
Mm-hmm.
like partnership, that void, like you have all yourself and all of that shit that you carry, but we move with it. I mean, I think if we start to tell ourselves I have to move on, again with the air quotes, I think we're going to fail because there is no moving on.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think I say that to a lot of people as well when it's easier to give advice than to take your own or to take it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I say that to people all the time in the sense that like, I don't think that you actually stop loving somebody or stop feeling the certain feelings. You just get used to it. Like you get used to the pain, right?
Mhm.
And you move forward with it and it's always a part of you.
Yeah.
Just like you pick up mannerisms or different things from people you date or from people that come into your life, like again the snowball thing, it just becomes a part of you, and there's little things that you're just going to develop and that's going to be ingrained for you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Or maybe not, maybe it'll fall away at some weird strange point where something else kind of better comes along or a different way to do things. And no, I absolutely agree with you. And you're not arguing with me. I think a big part of like this podcast is having these discussions, open discussions, right? And me being able to kind of talk about it. And yeah, you happen to be able to bring that on me. So maybe it was a bad call having you on. Just kidding.
Oh, thanks.
No, I mean, I'm just kidding. I'm teasing.
Well, it's a
Um,
relief to talk about something, different than the pandemic or my job, honestly. So,
yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure it can be a lot and it can be very difficult and it can be, it's nice to get these breaks, right? But at the same time, it's important to sit with yourself. Again, because it's if you don't do that, you're going to be in a very difficult spot moving forward.
mm-hmm,
I think for me is that this a big part of it is that I'm so willing to do the work. And I genuinely, like, at least as far as I know consciously, I'm genuinely willing to do the work and try to like work through things and better myself. um and sometimes I feel like I'm moving further and further away from my goals because of that case, right? And not only that, because now I'm aware of the fact that I'm doing the work and where I'm going wrong and developing myself in that way, but somehow I still end up in similar situations. And I'm like, okay, what stone am I leaving unturned? And I
mm-hmm,
think that more than anything is exhausting.
mm-hmm,
It's less the avoidance or anything like that. It's more of just like I feel like I'm doing it and I'm doing the best I can. And it's just like, okay, so, and it's just trusting again, maybe the universe or whatever, and letting it just kind of put whatever is next in front of me.
mm-hmm.
And having that faith and having that trust can be very difficult because I want to be in control
Yeah.
of my destiny. And
Don't
that's,
we all?
I mean, that's where the spirituality comes into play, right? I think it's a very
Mhm.
important part of the human development and humans in general. And so many people are atheists, and I respect it, and it's not a problem. And I'm not saying I believe in creationism or anything like that, but what I do believe is that there's a part of us that needs to just let go. And the
Mhm,
only way we can really kind of learn to let go is, or the easiest way is by kind of attaching it to this idea of a higher power, or there's some things that just happen that are just happening and not happening to us, right?
yeah.
And I mean, do you have that religious study background? Do you find that like it finds its way into your work these days, or do you try to kind of set a boundary between those two?
Oof, keyword being these days. Um,
Yeah.
I want to say that as I get older, I find myself becoming more spiritual, or
Hmm.
certainly wanting that. Does it come into my work these days? These days, meaning right now, yeah, because I feel like if we do not acknowledge the spiritual crisis that
Hmm.
comes along with being in isolation, with being detached from one another, then we aren't really seeing a whole person,
Hmm.
right? And when we are feeling so deeply alone, and when we are anxious and worried about truly factual fears that we don't have any control over, when we're worried about things like death and extreme loss and the future that feels so uncertain, like that is a spiritual crisis.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it does come into my work. I don't talk about God in my work unless that's brought up, and I never share my opinions. I really do try to stay away from that.
Yeah.
But that feeling comes up, right? And I think we have to acknowledge that it is a spiritual feeling, and it, I feel it in my life right now.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's good. I think it's an important part of ourselves that we need to develop, and it's very understimulated because of this dualistic world and oversimplified world that we live in, and we need to just be in or out, right? So, and I'm the same way. I get it. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about your background.
My background.
Are you from New Mexico?
I am from New Mexico. I've lived here my whole life, with some like very spotty periods of spending summers elsewhere. But yeah.
Okay. What part of New Mexico?
I was smiling because I knew you were going to ask me this, nervously smiling. So I was, my family moved from Santa Fe when I was about 4 to Stanley, which is only well known now because of Jeffrey Epstein, which is super dark. But yeah, so my parents were very eccentric, to say it lightly. And I'm not even, I still don't understand why, but moved me out to basically the middle of nowhere. And there's a lot of places in New Mexico that are like this. I mean, we were just surrounded by thousands of acres of nothing but land. So,
yeah. So you grew up just being outdoors all the time.
Yeah.
Is that something that you still love?
Being outdoors? Oh, absolutely. I always think to myself, like, I'm starting to think about, like, where I want to be in 5 years. And I always think, like, I don't know if I could live in a giant city because I have to be outside, and yeah, always. I get very, like, I feel very suffocated if I can't do that. So yeah, and I did not love being outside when I was younger. It was just really the only thing to do.
Yeah. So you had no real option.
No, it was yeah, it had to be outside, which, I mean, I'm not totally complaining. It taught me a lot. But yes, outside was the place that I could be.
Okay. I mean, I knew, I guess last time we spoke, you had mentioned that you were wondering where you wanted to live, but you also recently started looking for a house, right?
Yeah, I bought a house. Yeah, and during a
house?
pandemic.
Is this the house?
The house, yeah. I'm in it right now. Yeah, so buying a house during a pandemic was not great. I want to say that. So yeah, but I did it as like I know that I'm not gonna live here forever. I did it as an investment. I've been renting for 13 years. And it was just done. Like, I did not enjoy my last landlord experience. And, I'm like a fully fledged adult now, and I got really tired of answering to other people and having them tell me that I had to pull a weed out of my yard. So yeah, I did this.
So now your yard's full of weeds, is that what you're telling me?
Oh yeah, totally. No, definitely not. Definitely not. But
now you want to pull the weeds because you're like, oh
yeah, because it's my house, exactly.
Right.
And because I can put down like underlayment. Anyway, not related. Yeah. So no, this is not. I don't know where I'm going to go next. And it's hard to think about given where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, the world's going to rapidly change. I feel like it's going to be very different after this, and we'll see where the economy goes, right? We'll see how it's impacted long term. Hopefully, it bounces back pretty quickly. But a part of me I think a part of me wants to. I saw something today about like wanting it to go back, but in reality, like it wasn't so great.
No, it was
right?
not great.
It was not like very great. Like, you're sure there's certain things that were good, right? Again, pulling it back to like our quality of lives, are mine and yours are pretty good, but socially, politically, economically, a lot of things just really are unjust and not very good, and it's kind of staring us in the face now because the system has just failed so many people, and
Mm-hmm.
it's obvious now. But I'm I believe I have a feeling that people just won't catch on, and they'll let it go back to how it was, unfortunately. My hope is that we move forward and we actually start making some change, right? However that is. And I don't know what it'll look like. And I have no illusion that it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I hope. I mean, what are your thoughts on life moving forward?
Mm. I agree with you. I don't think things got bad. I think they were always bad. I think that
Mm-hmm.
the disease of what is happening and been happening in this country was already there. I think
Mm-hmm.
more people are just experiencing it. I mean, we already had insanely high unemployment and
Mm-hmm.
underemployment, and we already had huge gaps in equity and access to healthcare, education, income, blah, blah, blah. I could keep going.
Yeah.
Right? These things already existed. But now I think what's happening is that people who were previously in places of privilege are experiencing that also. So my thoughts of what is going to happen, and I mean, I'm being completely honest, I think things would have to get really bad, more so than they are now, for us to have something like another New Deal to
Mm-hmm.
change where we're at. I think that there is a now cultural identity around things like not having access to healthcare. I think there's a
Yeah.
cultural identity around access to education. And I
Mm-hmm.
think these ideas have been enmeshed with politics so much so that when people vote one way or the other, they're also believing that these injustices are acceptable and they're just a part of who we are. And I don't know how we move past that. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Other than working with young people to change it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I know that now we are at a ripe opportunity for pretty drastic change,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been amazed at the pushback still of establishing equitable practices. I mean, if you would have, I mean, I know I'm pretty well educated in these things and I knew that things were going to get bad, but would I suspect that people were going to go out en masse and protest government lockdowns? Like, no, I didn't think that was going to happen. That just blows my mind. That
Yeah.
blows my mind that that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so so maybe I'm jaded, but do I have a whole lot of hope that those very same people are going to come to their senses and call their representatives and be like, hey, I also want health insurance, please, right? Because they're advocating to go back to the same broken system.
Yeah.
Why are we out there protesting about having health insurance? Like, what is this?
Because they don't, it's a lack of education. It's a lack of education. And a lot of these people come from areas that, I mean, or from families or whatever regions that, I mean, that don't really kind of distribute that sort of knowledge, right? Or um, it's not discussed, it's not talked about. So it makes sense. They're working against themselves.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
and then hegemony and the brainwashing of the media, right, or just popular culture in general. Like
Mm-hmm.
it convinces you that you need these things, that you need this quality of life, and that life without this is not good.
Like
But
haircuts.
like haircuts or different things, and just people just don't realize it because they don't know any different. They've been socializing and grown up in this system. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea of anything different or anything else, really, they can't fathom it. Um, and it's insane because some of us can, but some of us have also had access to certain literatures and certain level of education and this or that, or maybe have the desire or just the know-how to kind of do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or grew up with this dualism, right? And being able to go back and forth between things. And I think a lot of people who can't see another side or another perspective have only been one way their whole life, have never had to look at things from a different perspective. And that's, again, a sign of privilege, right?
Right.
But it's also a privilege to be able to do that. So
Yeah. It's also a privilege to be able to have this conversation. Who knows where I would be if I was born into a different situation, or if I,
mhm.
didn't have access to education. And
I
I
mean,
think,
I wouldn't even bother to invite you.
no, thank you. Thanks. Oh, ouch.
I'm just kidding.
Jeez. I would
I'm
have
just
no
kidding.
value.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much. I mean, you produce or you consume. Which one are you?
right. I, both, always.
I mean, that's capitalism. It is it's very basis, right? That's
Mhm.
what it is. It's are you in or you out?
Yeah.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, the hard work, burn the midnight oil. Like, we're going full circle back to what you were saying earlier.
Hmm.
That's the system we live in.
Yeah.
We glorify it. We glorify draining ourselves for nothing, for a paycheck that's not
Hmm.
going to get us by. So, I mean,
I think we have to acknowledge, though, like there's a lot of, I mean, certainly, like myself as a person, I feel it, but then I step back. There's a lot of anger of the
mm,
quote unquote other side, right? But we have to realize that suffering exists in both places,
yeah,
right? We have
yeah,
to realize that there's a reason that we have the like disenfranchised like
mm-hmm,
right. you know
mm-hmm,
we have to understand where that comes from, and we also have to understand the mechanisms that is continuing to perpetuate that ideology. And I think that we, coming from a place of intellectual privilege, look
yeah,
down on those people, quote unquote those people, and we don't understand that there's pain there too. um,
yeah. They have
and
fear, right? They're acting out of fear.
Yeah, and so are we. Of
Yeah,
course, we
absolutely.
are all
We
in a
all
place
are.
of fear right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have like a government and a media that is furthering the schism between us. We're all experiencing. It's wild to me that we live in a time globally where we are all experiencing the same exact thing, and yet we have never been more divided,
Mm-hmm,
right? And that is
mm-hmm,
not natural. Like,
mm-mm,
we are communal creatures. We
mm-hmm,
want to be together,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think that this divide, like, yeah, in some ways, we're always going to battle with each other, but the way that we are divided right now is coming from an outside force. If there was ever a time for us to come together, it was going to be now.
Yeah, I mean, it's divide and conquer. That's the whole
Mhm.
idea. You create individualism, and you create these divides between every single person, and they're staying into their devices or this and that. Then they're their own individual person, which is good. I think we're all unique, but when you start doing that to an extreme, you lose the idea of collectivism and the idea that we're in this together. And
Mhm.
that's because you can do that. You can turn anybody against anybody,
Absolutely.
because they're not going to help you. They're out to get what you want, your
Mhm.
portion,
Mhm.
right? So now that we know how, let's go out there and do it and get us some money. Just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I know. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're doing great work, and I really do. It's always really good to talk to you. If anything, it's my mini your mini therapy session. Not that I need one, but you're just a good friend, right? And you're a good listener. So I'm glad that you've been so busy, because you've been doing so much. But also, the pandemic happened, so we couldn't really find the time to hang out anywhere.
Yeah, it's true.
So life. But thank you again so much for coming on. I'm gonna hit pause real quick, and then we can just debrief real quick.
Okay.
All right, bye, folks.